Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First, on a light note, Honorable Speaker, you know, I have always argued with John Mbadi on the floor on who qualified before the other. Now that we are birds of a feather, I can now confirm from his certificates that I actually qualified 6 months ahead of him. But, Honorable Speaker, besides being birds of a feather in the profession, let me declare interest because John Mbadi was also an accountant at the university when I was a student there. And having served with him in this house for almost 12 years, and I chaired the Budget and Appropriations Committee, where he has been a member since he joined Parliament, if I'm right.
That's correct.
So, John Mbadi, now CS nominee finance in the National Treasury, and you've put it very well, and you know there are many things that we agree on, especially regarding the budget-making process. And having been a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee and also chaired the Public Accounts Committee, you have said you have had a very good oversight of the expenditure side of government. And I must agree also with you on the revenue side in terms of the finance bill being an omnibus bill and things that we can secure from the finance bill that is seen to have been lost. But you've also touched on issues touching on KRA, and there are systemic problems in KRA. And you and me know that our revenue projections, we have always not agreed with them. I would now want to hear what you intend to do now that the shoe is on the other foot, to make sure that our revenue projections are as realistic as possible. Because, you know, part of the problems that we've had with our fiscal deficit is unrealistic revenue projections coming from the National Treasury and, of course, having emanated from KRA. We've spoken about the systemic problems in KRA, including the lack of custom systems management, proper customs management systems at KRA. I would also want to hear what you intend to do. And you know there is resistance within KRA to have proper systems put in place. Because as you say, especially on the custom side, people are minting hundreds of millions for themselves at the expense of the nation. I want to hear specific what specific measures you intend to take at KRA to ensure first that there are proper systems. Because as you rightly said, that is what is lacking within KRA, besides the management problems that you have alluded to. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Can you manage 2 in a row? Junet?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to ask the nominee, Chairman. You see,
he is here as a nominee
I forgot, Chair.
and not as a chairman of any formation out there.
Honestly,
Actually, I hope, Mr. Speaker, he was not referring to me being the chairman of ODM. I've already resigned.
oh,
Yes.
you know, Mr. Speaker, you know, for when you call somebody for the last 15 years chairman, that
Yes.
becomes his name. So
Yes.
anytime I find I used to call him chairman. Now, Mr. Nominee, one thing I wanted to ask you is that you have explained it very well. But you have come to this position, you are coming to this position at a time when the economy is not in a very good situation. And as you are aware, 70 shillings of the 100 shillings collected is going to pay debt. And Kenyans don't even know whether we are paying real debt or fake debt. That's what they're grappling with. So how will you ascertain what kind of debt we have, whether it is a fake debt or real debt? Secondly, as you are aware, the poor in this Kenya feel that this economy is rigged against them. They don't feel they are part of this economy. What measures will you put in place to tell Kenyans, the poor ones, that you are part and parcel of this economy? Issues of pending bills, Chair. Issues of 30% of the budget. I mean, nominee. Nominee. Issues of 30%. How will you achieve 30% of our budget to go to the development expenditure? My last question is, nominee, you know very well, me and you never believed in this bottom-up economy. Now we have found ourselves here. You know what we believed in. You know, your principle must guide you. How are you going to marry these different thoughts of bottom-up economy and what you believed in? You participated in manufacturing another economic manifesto. So tell me how you'll marry the two, Mr. Nobini, this bottom thing now that you're inside.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me start by addressing...
Leave the laughing to the public. Just listen and...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah? I think... thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to start by responding to the questions raised by the Leader of Majority, my friend Kimani Ichungwa. Yes, I agree. We have complained, Mr. Speaker, previously that our budget estimates, especially on revenue side, are not realistic. In fact, I'm persuaded that we have been using revenue as a balancing figure. Revenue projection as a balancing figure. It's like what we do as a country is we look at our expenditure level, where we want to spend, how much we want to spend. Then once we get that total, then we ask ourselves how much can we raise from the loan or debt market, external and domestic. Then the remaining amount we put as revenue projection. That to me is very wrong. We must reform the economic policy department of National Treasury. Reforming does not mean you lay off staff. I want to be very clear there. Just focus our economic projections so that they are realistic, they are based on evidence of economic growth. If previously you have not been able to collect so much, why do you then pretend that you can collect so much in the subsequent year? Like, Mr. Speaker, we have collected only 2.2 trillion this year from ordinary revenue. Yet we are projecting to collect, we had projected initially before the challenges we faced with the finance bill to collect 2.9. That is a whooping 700 billion increase. That was not realistic. Right now it has come back to, or come down to 2.6. So we must be realistic in our revenue projections. But even be that as it may, we must also still enhance revenue collection by reforming KRA, because we are still under collecting. But in terms of budgeting and projections, I agree with Honorable Kimani Ichungwa that we are going forward, we are going to be more realistic so that we don't have big budget deficits and budget revisions in the course of the year as we have had it previously. In terms of how do we address the challenges of collection of taxes, custom duties, it is, and I mentioned it, the system is porous. We must make sure that we automate it and automate it properly. Sometimes we pretend to be using automation, yet we use outdated systems, systems that are just aiding the leakage of revenue instead of helping. We must carry out proper review and evaluation of KRA. I have the first meetings, I will guarantee this committee, if you approve my nomination to become the CS, National Treasury, my first meetings will be focused on how to reform KRA. Because without that, we are not going to succeed in revenue mobilization. Honorable Junet, you've raised the issue of debt, and you have asked, how do we determine real from fake debt? I don't want to use it fake or real, but I talked about accountability, debt accountability, public debt accountability. And I said, I am committing that we must try to make this a statutory document so that every Kenyan knows how much we owe, to who, and at what cost. The other thing that I want to talk about in debt management is we must manage our liability. We have to restructure our debts. Let me just give me 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, to say the following. That if you look at how our debt was structured, especially external debt, in 2010, we had 60% of that debt, 66 actually, under multilateral, which are concessionary loans, and only 4% on commercial debt. We moved to a point where 31% in 2020, 31% of our debt was commercial debt. Averaging interest rate is 8 to 9%. That is not sustainable for an economy. It is now coming down, it is 23%. My focus is to have commercial debt at no more than 5% of our debt portfolio, external debt portfolio, and have 75% of our debt under multilateral debt and only 20% or thereabout on bilateral debts. With that, you can clearly reduce the cost of debt. But something else about debt is, Mr. Speaker, and sample this, honorable members, our debt portfolio is 50-50, almost, external, domestic. Yet interest payable per year on external debt is 260 billion, on domestic debt is 700 and almost 50 billion. 3 times we are over borrowing domestically. And we have raised the interest rates of borrowing domestically. I know I'm one of the people, if you look at my wealth declaration, I have a government bond I've bought of 13 million, and I'm getting almost 16% returns. That is unsustainable. We must have a conversation, Mr. Speaker, and not to scare anyone. We must have a conversation with banks. We are not going to control interest rates.
We want you to give the country hope.
Yes.
You are doing so.
Yeah.
Yes.
We are not, I'm not going to advocate for interest rates control, as in setting the rates to be charged. It had very disastrous result when we attempted that, remember, through a legislation. But banks promised us, Mr. Speaker, banks promised us that if we remove the rate caps, they would loan even more to the private sector. Presently, that is not the case. In fact, bank executives sometimes can just sit and take teas and do nothing, but still make money for shareholders by buying government bonds and government bills. We must move away from that. Actually, we have crowded out private sector. You can see the youth is up in arms. They have no jobs because the private sector is not borrowing money from the
it's not lending.
The private sector is not borrowing money
from banks, yes,
to invest. And so we can't create jobs.
Yes.
I know that one of the reasons why we have been raising the interest rate is to control inflation. Inflation has reasonably been controlled now at 4.6%. We must also be alive to the fact that we must balance the two. There must be a net-off effect so that we also grow our economy. Thank you. Finally, there was the issue of what do we do about the poor and the pending bills. Pending bills is a serious matter, Mr. Speaker. I think it is something that we must agree on. I know we are moving as a country to accrual basis. As an accountant, I know with the accrual basis of accounting, then we will not be talking about pending bills because there will be no cutoff. Any bill that comes will automatically move to the next financial year and pay it. But these pending bills, a lot of them are also fictitious. I know there is a committee in place, and I don't want to criticize that committee. I know it is headed by the former Auditor General, Edward Ouko. But, Mr. Speaker, I ask myself this question. The pending bills that I'm told have been submitted to that committee, or before that committee, is upwards of 663 billion claims. And there are a total of 114,000 plus of those claims. How do you have one auditor, even if you are a genius, with a few months to audit that and give you? So what I'm saying in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to have a system where there is nothing like pending bills verification, because it has become a way of just failing to pay bills that are owed. We must have a system.
Not only that, nominee, you remember about 8 years ago, there was a committee to verify pending bills. It became a toll station. And all the committee was doing is go to a town like Eldoret, pitch in a hotel, and people with so-called pending bills turn up with briefcases and have their pending bills approved.
Exactly.
You remember?
Yes.
Yes.
And it
what are you going to do differently?
It may happen again and again. What my proposal would be is that we may have to have a system, and it can even be through a legislation, where a legislation we have in the PFM Act that pending bills form first charge. But we should criminalize failure to pay pending bills. But above all, as CS Finance, which does not even require any policy or any legislative intervention, I will make sure that we have a system in place which locks anyone who attempts to pay a new bill and ignoring an old one. The system can lock you out. So that first in, first out. If a bill is supposed to be payable, let it be paid. This idea, I remember I've been an accountant at the University of Nairobi, and during our time, Mr. Speaker, what used to happen is you'd prepare checks. You know, there was cash flow problems. You'd prepare checks and put them in a drawer, many of them, a bundle. And so people come, and there was a big black book which was called check register. So the suppliers come, and checks are issued through that register. So depending on how nice you talk to the accounts department, then your check is released. Yet the one for Honorable Speaker even goes stale after 6 months. Those are things that we can cure through a system where you have an accounting system which allows payments to be made on first come, first served basis. Thank you. Finally, Honorable Junet asked me a question I didn't expect to come from him, but I expected to come. Mr. Speaker, I've been asked about bottom-up. Bottom-up economic transformation agenda. That is how it is called. Let me tell you, through you, Mr. Speaker, tell Honorable Junet this, that bottom-up is actually a concept of UDA, read Kenya Kwanza. But I want to tell him that if you look at the philosophy of UDA and ODM, there is no difference. Actually, the two are social democrats.
Yes.
The two political parties promote social democracy. But let me leave that for that. Look at better. What is it all about? It talks about job creation. It talks about cost of living. It talks about agricultural productivity. It talks about digital economy. What about ODM? What was in our manifesto? We talked about the same. Actually, the better concept is on value addition. Now, ODM manifesto, which I participated in drafting, we had manufacturing, emphasizing on agriculture as raw material. So it is manufacturing supported by agriculture.
Did you read Animal Farm?
I read it some time back, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
But now, better is on value addition.
Yes.
For agriculture for value addition. ODM, agriculture for manufacturing. Semantics. But again, finally, Mr. Speaker, housing was our concept, both of us. But finally, Mr. Speaker, there is the Constitution and the PFM Act, which will guide my conduct in office, if approved. Thank you.
Naisula? Yes.
If you allow me, Honorable Speaker, just a supplementary on one of the things John Mbadi said around workings of the National Treasury and your work as a member of Parliament, the abuse of Article 223.
Yes.
And you know, since we were both in the Budget Committee, this has been a huge problem. And it continues to date. You've had in the recent past very senior government officers trying to arm twist people in the National Treasury to pay even confidential expenditure out of Article 223. I want to hear what you intend to do to now stem from the root cause or where this problem emanates from the National Treasury, abuse of Article 223. Lastly, when you spoke about the good things that we lost in the finance bill, you may or you may not agree with me that partially the problem was out of very poor communication by the National Treasury. Kenyans out there were left to just listen to what was being said by members of parliament during debate on the finance bill to know what were the good things in that finance bill. How differently will you now, at the helm of the National Treasury, if approved by this committee, will you communicate to Kenyans to be able to know that a finance bill, as you said, is an omnibus bill? It has very many good things for the benefit of the country, which get lost in the misinformation and disinformation campaign that was there with the last one. So my question is, how will you shift the communication from the National Treasury? And with all respect to those who were there before, there was literally no communication coming from the National Treasury. How do you intend to change that? And I agree with you on the pending bills, but also tell you that probably what you also need to do is look at the procurement. For instance, and you've been a member of parliament all these years, CDF. There are never any pending bills in CDF because of the system through which we procure. You only procure when you have exchequer with you. So probably if you get approved, that's one of the other things you need to look at, to remodel whatever is being done in mainstream government with CDF.
Mr. Speaker, go ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. To the nominee, Honorable Mbadi, you are on record in Parliament during debate of the last approval of the cabinet secretaries, and it's gone viral, widely known, that you referred to the cabinet secretaries then as skunks. Now you find yourself as one of the nominees. Are you a skunk or are you not? The second question is that we have advisors who, I'm reliably informed, sit at State House